Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ralph Simon. I'm based in London, but I also spend most of my time flying in planes around the world because my main interest is I like to tickle the tentacles of the future and see which leg of the future octopus can help India. For me, I've been working in India for a number of years, primarily in the entertainment space, but what I thought I would do today, because Parmesh is someone whose opinion is valued extremely highly at an international level, and I wanted to give some examples of some of the extraordinary innovation that is starting to be present and which modern day India is proving to be driving in a really effective way. When I first met Nandan Nilekani a few years ago, and he told me about the book that he was writing called Imagining India, I was really taken by the fact that, obviously having had the background of Infosys, he saw the whole growth of the outsourcing industry, but that was just the first stage of a much, much wider and excellent way in which India and the future of India and the energies of India can be realized not just at a national level, which of course is important in fast changing times, but also the entire perception of India on a global basis is changing beyond anything that would have happened over the last 25 or 30 years because of the incredible spirit in India and the wonderful Indian quality of Juga. Okay, so I want to take you on a bit of a ride into the future and see what you think of some of what I'm going to show you. So as I said, my name is Ralph Simon. I'm not Harry Potter's father. But what I am is I'm a screen-ager. Now, how many screen-agers are there here in the audience this afternoon? 1, 2. 2 screen-agers? 3?
No, what's a screen-ager?
What is a screen-ager? Let me show you what a screen-ager is. A screen-ager is that. So, you are all screen-agers. And this is one of the great forces that is driving the creativity in India, but also more importantly, it is the whole notion of screen-agers that drives and will drive the Godrej business and various product lines and all of the ways in which Godrej can reach not just the wider community in India, but also the plans for expanding Godrej in all of the emerging economies around the world. So, here's an interesting phrase which was made by a gentleman who's generally regarded as one of the great gurus of the area of emerging cultural practice and cross-media thinking and what is known now in the media world as transmedia. We shouldn't be focusing on emerging technologies, we should be focusing on emerging cultures. And just as you heard from some of our earlier speakers, the whole notion of emerging cultures, whether it's languages in particular areas. For example, I was recently in Chennai and I was meeting with Kamal Hassan, wonderful filmmaker, makes some great stuff, and he was telling me about the importance of being able to do things in Tamil and in Tollywood, but of course also expanding that so that it reaches a wider audience. And it is this essence of cultural practice that is so important. So this is pretty much self-evident. It affects everybody's lives. I'm sure you see that this wheel of information is turning fast. This takes us back to the great, great library in Alexandria in Egypt. Many, many years ago, you can see the first, I wouldn't call them e-books, but that was really the father of the e-book. You can see on the bottom of the screen the way that people, the great authors of the world, had to have a chisel and a hammer. So that was very important at that stage because it really drove civilization. Of course, in the 1500s, when Gutenberg had the printing press, deciding on printing Bibles so that Bibles were not the province of just the religious orders, but went out to the public, mass media, to the masses. And of course, the printing press also created for the first time some kind of global concept. Creating news. The first time you could have news that could be disseminated in a way that really got to a broader base of the population. And it's interesting because in India, where newspaper circulation and readership is on the rise, perhaps more so than any other country in the world, this has got a modern connotation as well. Of course, the printing press also created public politics and created a forum for the voice to be heard of not just the king or the queen or the president. At that stage they weren't presidents, but let's say the Pope. And this led to the expression of popular taste, popular discontent, and the way in which democracies could find their early roots. So, if we have a look at this slide here and see that if we want to improve human life, and really Godrej is in a position where Godrej's philosophy as a corporate entity with corporate social responsibility and sustainability really marries into the whole notion of improving human life. And the more information and intelligence about human information is really what is going to be leading us into the next 100 years. This is the problem. How many of you feel that your lives have been dominated by voicemails, emails? You've got to deal with this avalanche, this waterfall of communications and information that you have to deal with. You know, while you're trying to deal with family issues and making sure that you're just getting things right in your domestic environment, you've got this flow of information that is sometimes quite difficult to deal with. We'll look at some ways of doing this. And of course, we've got access to more technology than we had before. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk specifically about what is going to be coming to India with a ferocious speed. It's already started, but this is going to get much, much more considerable over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. And that is two-way networks, where you can have a two-way linkage, a two-way communication, a two-way channel, and of course, the vehicle and the instrument that is doing this more than anything else is the mobile device. And we're not talking just about mobile phones, we're talking about tablets. Someone mentioned earlier about the low-cost tablet, India leading the way in that. There's a billionaire from Silicon Valley just donated 1.5 million tablets into the Indian educational system. So this is something we'll touch on as we go through some of these slides. So I thought I'd give you just a quick little snapshot of where we were just 15 years ago to show you what things would have been like. Of course, India 15 years ago in terms of media in itself was very limited, just one voice. Certainly in terms of television and radio, certainly nothing like it is today. So if we just spool the video forward and have a look at where we are just 15 years later, look at what we now have to contend with. These are not impediments to our daily life, they should actually be accelerants and helpful aids in our daily life. But even within this framework, let's have a look at how there are even elements within what we see 2011 onwards, where we've got this. So this is kind of like a mush of electronic spaghetti soup, alphabet soup, where we've got to look at HTTP, FTP, HTML. I don't know if I'm okay or not okay when I look at all of these acronyms, but these are all things that are now affecting our lives. And also, more importantly, if you are involved in making products that are going to the mass market, these are all elements that are going to have to be part of our vocabulary and our tool set as we go forward. So here's a statistic that is history now, fast history. Look at the growth in that. Just looking in terms of the numbers, think of the infrastructure that is required to provide that. Obviously much more comprehensive than we even thought of, but this is where India really shines, because it's in this infrastructural backdrop, notwithstanding the needs of the rural communities and the needs of the poor in India, but it is this backbone infrastructure that is really leading the way for the future. For example, Nandan Nilekani and the data card that he's been working on as cabinet minister in the national government, obviously very, very important, and this will feed directly into these new methods of being able to communicate at a mass level. So, look at this, some more statistics as you can see there. And then if we have a look at it on a global basis and see that in a population of 7 billion, the 7th billionth baby actually was born in Bandra, I believe, in the Olive Tree restaurant. Some parents were having dinner. Can you believe it? That's where it actually happened. The baby's going to get free meals in Bandra for the rest of us.
So Africa is in that slide. Africa is really the dark continent still, huh?
Africa is definitely the dark continent. You see a little bit of light in the bottom there in South Africa, a little bit in Nigeria, a little bit in Ghana, but that is still a dark continent, and many dark areas. Certainly India is looking better than Africa, but nonetheless there are wide disparities in terms of the way that access into the web, as we heard from our previous speakers, shows us just what that issue might be. So here's an interesting slide. Some people talk about the fact that in the future we're going to see the extinction of newspapers. And some people are saying that in the United States that's going to take place in 6 years from now. Well, how about this for an actual true fact? 4 major cities in America in the last 14 months have seen their major newspapers go bankrupt, are insolvent. Some are still operating but in liquidation. In Los Angeles, in Denver, in Philadelphia, those 3 major cities in the United States are finding that their main newspapers are no longer as relevant as they used to be, where young people make sure that their source of news tends to be either through their communities or their social networks, or else through other devices rather than a daily newspaper. How many of you have kids under the age of 17? How many of your kids under the age of 17 do not wear a wristwatch? And why don't they wear a wristwatch? Because they don't need the time on their wristwatch, because they're always referring to their device. Or, of course, they look at the sun and they can just tell it because intuition. Obviously, good gene pools that they come from. So, really what we're moving towards, and very, very quickly, and this has been a process that has been expanded over the last 15 years, is from me to we. Now, there's in Africa, a very, very popular phrase in Africa is to look for the spirit of Ubuntu. Ubuntu means we rather than me. That is to say, the community interest should be paramount, because if people combine and work within the community, that produces a wonderful thing, which in India we call karma, and of course that is now an important factor of what we're trying to do in this new, confusing, but at the same time extremely exciting way of life. Now, how many of you here believe that we should be we rather than me? It's wonderful. Fantastic. It depends. Why is that?
Depends on context.
It depends on the context,
Yeah,
and that's something.
Always be me, or always be me.
That's great. Well, I think that's a very good point, don't you? Because I think, and that's something we'll look into as we continue on this little journey. Schmidt is now the chairman of Google, very famous. He was the one of the key executives at Sun Microsystems when they first started, and a very, very knowledgeable and really sensible executive who is very much known for precision. Precision in the way he speaks, the way he thinks, and the way he writes. And this is what he says. Now, how about that? And this is what he says. How about that? How do we store it? We all know about gigabytes. Do we know about petabytes and exabytes? This is really something that is a major worry to governments, because governments are now having to deal with the way that you can not only store, but also then disseminate mass blocks of information. Google have a site in Portland, Oregon, in the United States, that is the size of 4 large soccer fields, which is just simply a very high-speed data processing center that is translating the kind of data demands that come from Google. I was speaking to a fellow last night here in Mumbai who works for Google's YouTube, and he was telling me that they have 3 billion videos a day downloaded on YouTube. 3 billion videos a day downloaded on YouTube. Just think of the volume and think of how that means and how that matters. So we're looking at all different kinds of devices and information and technologies that we can use for this. So what started out as that, these 2 wires really talk about the 2-way flow of information, because it's this that's embodied in mobile and wireless devices that is changing the way that we think, we breathe, and the way that we plan and exercise everything to do with the future. But the one good thing is just what you see on the screen. It liberates information that's trapped inside products. So from a Godrej perspective, think about it like this. If we at Godrej, or you at Godrej, had to put some little message on every single pack of a bar of soap that went out that could invite some kind of two-way communication from the bar of soap to the consumer through their device, almost along the lines of what we heard about the voice-based social media in rural areas. This is something that can really change perceptions and get a much deeper involvement from the community. Of course, this extends our senses through our interaction with others. And of course, the other thing too is that it fuses the digital domain with the real world. So this is a device that came out about a year ago, very interesting. Television would be good in rural areas. And of course, with the high degree of connectivity, certainly with mobile phones, from the pioneers such as Sunil Mittal, in developing some of the big networks in this country, this is now going to be much, much more possible. We saw that the percentage of smartphones in India is still extremely small, less than 5%, is that the correct number? Less than 5%. However, in the next 12 to 18 months, we are going to see a rocket ship spike of smartphone implementation for the following reasons. In the same way that there's a US $35 tablet. 2 weeks ago in London, Nokia had their big Nokia World. It's kind of like Mac World. It's a big exhibition. 3,000 people from all over the world came to London, and they showed the new smartphone device that's going to be on sale for around $60. That might be a little bit more than the Micro Max phone that is now available in India. But still, the point is, over the next 18 months, we're going to see an explosion in smartphone touchscreen usage. Of course, this has mobile internet on it. And with this, we're going to see a very, very big acceleration in a lot of the things that I'm going to show you in the coming slides. Nike. Who would have thought that you could put two-way communication into a sports shoe? Well, these Nike shoes, which by the way you can get made for you, you can on a website determine what kind of shoe you want, which colors you want. Let's say, for example, you wanted to support the Kolkata cricket team and you want to have them on your shoes. Of course, you wouldn't be able to wear that here. Maybe you could put it outside of Mumbai. But the point is that Nike have started to embrace this two-way communication inside their products, because people want to be able to have some kind of information they can get from keeping fit and they're running, and then immediately translate that wirelessly onto their phones. Credit cards, smart cards. India's been at the forefront of some of this very central development. Someone was telling me just today on the way in here to Godrej that if all the NRIs had to leave Silicon Valley in one mass movement, Silicon Valley would almost close down. And you know what? That is pretty much true, because it is really the NRI community in Silicon Valley that have been responsible for some of the most important developments of what has happened in this space. Sergey Brin and Larry Page, the two founders of Google, owed their entire success to an Indian mathematician who was the product of the IIT in, I think it's either in Mumbai or Bangalore, but suffice to say, when they were doing their PhD thesis, they had an Indian mathematics professor who was the one that helped them refine the algorithms that have literally changed the world. So you think to yourselves, who were the founders of Google? The founders of Google was Indian Juga. I think. Here's a pen that is smart, that also offers a two-way communication, as you can see from this slide. Look at all the different elements within that pen. As you write, it automatically transfers the information that you write on a piece of paper directly onto your computer or onto your mobile phone. Now think of how that might be used in various situations. This is not rocket science that's used in the space program or in building the rocket ships just a few doors down from where we are here now. But obviously there are going to be many different kinds of applications in something like this, whether it's in rural India or whether in the greater urban metropolitan centers that certainly are going to continue to grow as we have seen. Today, certainly for security reasons, post-2611, we see much more of these intelligent passports, so that governments can also identify where there might be people who might not necessarily be welcome. in a country and serving to hopefully protect the citizens. But of course, sometimes we as citizens have to be aware of the fact that we have to police our freedom and our rights under democratic traditions to make sure that some of these are not compromised. Now here's something interesting. How many of you have ever thought that you'd like your medical situation inside your body to really be examined at very close quarters? What you see here are little capsules that you can actually swallow. They're made of dissolvable materials, contains a tiny little radio frequency chip. So let's say, for example, you're trying to measure the scale or the scope of a gastrointestinal issue, obstruction or problem. You would swallow one of these. Within 48 hours it would start acting and communicating with your wireless device. Now that doesn't mean to say if your wife is pregnant, you're suddenly going to hear the baby talking to you, talking to you in Hindi. I mean, that would be perhaps something that only Bollywood could make up. With Shah Rukh has got a scene, Rub 1, where he's got this, aside from the fact of all the special effects, I think Shah Rukh Khan is the only man, when he pushes his chest out, his shirt pops off his chest. I don't know how many of you men here in the audience do that with your wives at night. But at any rate, this is an interesting piece of medical technology, and look at the size of that, and that is something that you can swallow and will actually interact, and of course you would then naturally, it would pass itself out of your system in a natural way without interfering in your body or your physical chemistry. And here we are. Here's another one. Body organs actually can send status updates to your cell phone. How's your heart when you're sitting next to that beautiful girl? Oh, suddenly going into cardiac failure or cardiac excitement. Okay, so here's an interesting, the Zeo is an interesting piece of technology. This is something to measure your sleep patterns. You go to sleep at night, these are very soft earphones, headphones, you put on your head, you tie it into your Zeo. In the morning when you wake up, it will show you what your sleep patterns were. So there's certain people who might have difficulty sleeping through stress. I mean, I know someone just this afternoon was telling me that he's had only 6 hours sleep in the last 4 days. And the first thing I could think of was, you need a Zeo to show you which hours. Is it during your REM sleep? What is it? And of course, it's just something that can show you a way in which you can also get a good work-life balance. Because today, I look at some of these people in the financial sector in Bombay dealing with such pressure with currencies going up and down, the debt crisis, the currency crisis, the financial crisis. They can't sleep at night, they can't sleep during the day, maybe they need one of these. Here's another example of the way technologies are really becoming somewhat invasive. This is an X-ray taken of someone going through an X-ray machine at Los Angeles Airport, where you go through LA Airport, and this can reveal whether you're carrying anything on your body. Of course, this is something that brings up privacy concerns, but sometimes this technology can also be quite invasive. Like this, in London today, they say that London is now the most CCTV city in the world, where any time you're walking in central London, within 200 yards, you're being focused on by any range of different cameras. George Orwell, the famous writer, when he wrote 1984 in 1958, I think it was, or somewhere in the 60s, he had this vision that this was something that we were going to be fighting against. But of course, after 26/11, people now feel perhaps a little more comfortable that there's better security and surveillance, so that we can be sure that something like that never ever happens again in India. And this is the flip camera, which was something that Cisco started. The idea was that you could have a very cheap video camera, and it was preceded, as you saw, by one of our previous speakers showing you the Pico projector on the mobile phone, which has now exceeded what Cisco did. And Cisco, that spent some $700 or $800 million buying this company, decided they were going to discontinue this because what's happening with mobile phones has far surpassed what they thought would happen with this. Imagine that, writing off all that money, but the speed of technology waits for nobody. Time and tide and technology waits for no man. We spoke about the number of hours uploaded onto YouTube. I think this is a bit old, so we won't go to that. One of our speakers mentioned earlier about Twitter being over capacity. Certainly that is the case in the Middle East with the Arab Spring in Tunisia. And when we think about people of the screen and who the screen-agers are, aside from all of us here, of course, if we have a look at some of these pictures, just on the left, top left, that is a little device that plugs into that part of your glasses, your spectacles, that will shine text onto your lens that you'll be able to read. Think of the opportunity for education for people that might have vision impairment or ways in which you can learn things. The little kid with the green computer, that comes directly out of MIT's Media Lab, one laptop per child, Nick Negroponte. To your left, looks like an orchestra conductor. It is actually a conductor who's conducting a 2,000-person choir on the internet around the world, 2,000 people in different cities around the world, all singing the same song. And he's conducting it. Who would have thought that something like that could have happened just a mere 8 years ago? Then of course you're looking at medical technology in the middle there, and you can see when you look at that, where James Cameron, the director at Avatar, used some of this really interesting technology to be able to create the kind of wonderful stuff that was shown in that movie. And by the way, how many of you have not seen Avatar? You've not seen Avatar. You've led a deprived adulthood. The one interesting thing is this: James Cameron, where do you think he got the stimulation to create some of the incredible characters that he created in Avatar? He loves deep sea exploration. Now, we're not talking about a few hundred meters below. We're talking about 3,000 meters below the, no, that would be too far, probably 3,000 feet, where he would see sea life that was unimaginable. And he used that as some of the creative stimulus for him in creating Avatar. On the extreme right, that's something I'm going to show you in a minute, and that's augmented reality. How many of you have heard of the term augmented reality? Okay, well, we'll show you in just a slide or two what that is. We spoke earlier about Farmville. Gamification is one of the most pertinent and obtrusive elements in today's life. Farmville, they've also got another game called Gagaville, which is all about Lady Gaga. But Farmville and gamification. Lady Gaga, you like Lady Gaga? She's really interesting. We'll tell you a story about her in a minute. But the interesting thing about gamification is we're seeing gamification now emerge in many different forms of modern life today. How many of you have heard of a site called Foursquare? So Foursquare was founded by a very interesting young Indian fellow in New York by the name of Naveen Selvadurai. And Naveen and his best friend loved going out partying and going to bars in New York City, and they liked going to a few special bars. And they thought, what if we could gamify our social lives? What if we could say every time we went to our favorite bar, we would get a badge to show that we were the supporters of that bar? And what if we were the people that came to the bar the most? So during the week, if we were at that bar the most, we could become the mayor of that bar. So why don't we start a platform that gets people to check in where they go to, because if they check in and they get a badge, they can then work with a retailer. Maybe the bar will give them a special discount if they know that the mayor is coming in. So can you imagine if you can become the mayor of the best restaurant in Car, or the mayor of some place in Nariman Point? Well, that's gamification, but bringing also in the elements of social media. Zynga, the company that created Farmville, is now being valued at, I think, something like $5 or $6 billion. Started by a guy in his bedroom, and the logo of the company is his dog. Fellow's dog is the logo of the company, but this is one of the successes of gamification. What we're also moving to is, instead of getting copies, we are now moving to an access kind of lifestyle economy civilization. One of the big successes of the last 9-12 months has been a music delivery site called Spotify. How many of you have heard of Spotify? This is how it works. For Spotify, you will have access to basically getting to listen to playlists of people's music or of Spotify's music. It's free, but if you get it for free, you have to listen to advertisements every half an hour or every 45 minutes. If you pay the equivalent of 700 rupees, then you get no advertising whatsoever. In Europe, they have 11 million users, 1 million paid, 10 million free. It got launched in the United States 6 weeks ago. There are now 7 million users. And this has introduced a whole new social pattern where people don't necessarily only listen to genres of music. Whilst people might listen to just Bollywood music, there might be others who like, for example, the music of Vishal Shekhar or Vishal Dadlani, as I'm sure some of you know him as. His playlist might be very, very interesting to many people around the country, and people are now sharing playlists as a means of enjoying how they listen to music. Or you would have a radio station with playlists, and then the computer will be able to determine what kind of music you like and give you suggestions of what playlists you might want to get. So the key there is, how will you get access, because this is not making copies like is prevalent in the print newspaper business. And it's not just in the media that we're seeing that. People at Boston, there was a transportation economist at MIT actually, who came up with this idea that why should you have a motor car? You have to pay for parking, a garage, insurance, maintenance. What if you could, online or on your phone, get a car just for the time you need it? Let's say, for example, you were working in this neighborhood and living in this neighborhood, and you needed a car to go into Bombay. Maybe you could just rent it for 2 hours and then not have the need to have a car, but do it exactly at your convenience and in a way that works. You see the bicycle on the right, the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, these are called Boris Bikes. What you do is you go online, you enter your credit card, you get a code, and you can then go and get a bike all over London, 6,000 bikes, where you can get a bike and ride it around. If you don't return the bike or the bike is damaged, they just charge your credit card. But this is all about collaborative consumption and traditional sharing turned into using new media to accelerate that process. Universities, now online universities are becoming extremely important. University of Phoenix in the United States pioneered this idea where you can now do your degree online. In India there was always a tradition of correspondence courses, companies like Aptech that were involved in secondary education and certification of education. So this is another way in which this is working. Digital technology with libraries, another interesting example of the way that all of these new technologies are impacting our lives. Who knows what this is? Each one of you have it. Each one of you and your children have it. Each one of you and your parents have it. That's the genomic code. So it's interesting because the genome was really solved by Craig Venter, the well-known American scientist, but this really is now going to give you a way in which you might be able to determine which genes might trigger certain disease conditions. Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, has a predisposition to Parkinson's disease. And what he's done is, he's got his genomic reading, and what he's hoping to do is to help fund some research that might correct the imbalance in the gene that might be the trigger that gives him Parkinson's disease. Now he's a young man, he's in his mid-30s. But isn't this interesting that technology, which might have cost $30,000 2 years ago, this is now something that would cost probably $300 or $400 to do. Who knows what that is?
Hadron Collider.
The Hadron Collider in 27-mile radius in Switzerland. And they said just a few weeks ago, a report came out saying they found that what Einstein discovered might not be correct. Looking at the nanoparticles that hopefully will lead us to some understanding of how our universe was created. Now someone say, of course, that Brahma created the universe, but of course, when we look at what science can do, this will also inform our whole view of what our future might actually be. Here we are looking at cranking up the collisions there. Obviously very important research, and costs a lot of money, had to be done by a number of European countries together. Now, here's an interesting thing that might actually apply to Godrej products in the future. These are paste-on radio frequency stickers, where you might want to communicate with your purchaser or your consumer you could just simply have one of those little bands stuck onto a product, and that might be able to show you where the product was sold, which shelf it was on in the store, also interacting with your stock control and something like that. And this is going to become cheaper and cheaper, but giving you radio frequency and two-way communication in the industrial sense. Who would have thought that we would have had smart cows? Well, we do, because if we have a look at the tags on the cows, these tags obviously will help the agricultural sector in terms of where their livestock might be and how they might be able to keep track on livestock so that they don't lose stock, or if someone steals the stock, maybe a local community would be able to register their livestock in this way using radio frequencies and technology. Very interesting development in the use of smart grids for electricity. We're seeing a very fast development in two-way technologies that will enable cities to have a much more economic use of power. Of course, with the demands in a large urban conurbation like Bombay, where we have to try and keep electricity costs down rather than up, using smart grids and smart power. This is already powering a number of cities in the United States. San Diego has probably got one of the most successful, where the cost of your electricity supplied to your home actually comes down if you use a smart grid. And this will give you an idea of how the smart home is evolving, which also uses this two-way technology. So you think about it. If all homes had this kind of smart grid, and this doesn't mean new builds like some of these big blocks of flats that are going up all over. I was in Pune a few weeks ago, and I was amazed to see buildings that would not look out of place in Beverly Hills in California, but also long-standing neighborhoods, traditional neighborhoods. This is something that is increasingly getting the attention of the national government to be able to reduce the cost of what electricity might be for the man and woman in the street. Here's a smart grid for a city, using the two-way technologies. And if you just have a look at all of those elements, this applies in India to in an increasing fashion. And even though there are many, many parts of India that desperately need to have the overhaul and reinstallation of many of these fundamental points of electric supply, the fact is that this is now influencing the movement. When the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to the Indian environmental scientist Dr. Rajendra Pachauri with Al Gore, the man who invented the internet. No, he didn't. His work really brought a focus on some of the great leadership that India is showing in this space. We're now seeing a very interesting development of smart motor cars. Ford just announced about 8 months ago something called Ford Sync. From an entertainment perspective, your satellite navigation system that is going to come standard in all cars will have a music system that will bring music to the front of the car, and you'll have screens in the back of the car that will bring film and television, so that if you've got kids on that long journey from Mumbai to Pune, those of you that are going this weekend to the IN7 festival, taking 3 hours to drive 180 kilometers or whatever it might be. But the point is, not only will this be able to give you two-way information about the performance of the automotive parts of the engine, but brings wireless connectivity using the Bluetooth of a phone, Bluetooth, which gives you communication from wireless device to wireless device directly into your car. We're seeing this now with Mahindra and with Tata, that are all looking at technology such as this to enhance the car. And it's not only going to be in these newly targeted models like the Nano, but it's really going to become a function of the way that all motor cars will have some kind of two-way technology. We're seeing here underwater exploration, radio transmitters, this kind of two-way, where a lot more of the exploration. We're now finding that there are interesting new medicinal compounds that are being found at very low depths submarine that can be sought after and found through this kind of technology. We're also seeing drones, obviously a big feature in having to contain Pakistan and some of the instability that is there, and of course Here in India, we have to be ever vigilant because who knows, that country is always such a tinderbox, and they say that has the highest percentage of chungumungus in the world, but I wouldn't know about that. But in any event, we're even seeing the drone philosophy being brought into the toy market. Here is a drone that is on sale in a toy store in the United States for $60 that allows you to have your own personal drone. So those husbands who think their wives are spending too much time in the dress shop or in the supermarket, maybe you can get some kind of idea. Or if you want to find out if Aishwarya Rai has had the baby or not, you can have this circling around the hospital. Actually, she did have a baby, right? She had a baby girl. Who was the father? I don't know.
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Okay, very good. We'll go very quickly. So, we've also got to think of the business model and how we work with business. These are some of the new areas that one has to think about when looking at the financial and business components of this new world. Virtual currencies, personal data, and time and attention is going to become ever more valuable because your time is now much, much more valuable. As we can see, well, speech, we know about that, we know about print, we know about that. This is what this has done in the Arab Spring. Look at them, protesting, very good. We've seen this in the Occupy movement. This actually was taken in Israel, protests there just a couple of months ago about the economy, and people are worried about jobs. And just the last couple of slides I wanted to show you on some interesting things. We'll just go quickly through these. Virtual currencies. How many of you have kids or yourselves that play video games? Well, this year, about $2 billion is going to be spent on virtual currencies in mobile games and video games. Virtual currencies. What do you think this is here? This is a virtual nightclub that was sold for $600,000 to somebody in the United States because he wanted the virtual nightclub on a Second Life type of virtual site. Someone paid $600,000. That's an incredible amount. But this is the kind of thing that is going on with virtual currencies in this new world. There's the figure. So, I told you about augmented reality, and this is going to be an interesting feature that will be embodied on smartphones over the course of the next 12 to 36 months. This is a picture taken of a canal in Amsterdam. And what happens is, you lift up your phone, let me see which one of my 3 phones I can pull out. It's a phone that's going to be available on the market in about 6 months in India. I would be able to hold up my phone looking at a street in Bombay. This shows me looking at those blue dots. The top there it says Funda Zoek Woningen, which means looking for properties to rent. It will point out which flats in this canal are available to rent just by looking through your phone. Because the real estate agent or the manager of the property will be able to put it up with GPS so that you could effectively hold up your device and it will show you, let's say you like salsa lessons and you want to see where in downtown Bombay you can get them. You could put up your phone and it'll say, there's where you can get salsa lessons, there's where you can get... So augmented reality is a layer of reality that's added onto real visuals, but in such a way that will give you additional information and also trigger commerce. Here it is on an urban scale, where you would be able to hold your phone up and have a look at where you can park, can't park. You can have advertising. It's going to be a very important area, which, believe me, is going to be growing in India over the course of the next 18 months. Just quickly, this is the car without a driver. Recently drove from San Francisco to Los Angeles, 400 miles, no driver. When they were stopped by the traffic police for speeding, the traffic policeman didn't know who to speak to. Of course, there was a car behind it. They said, do me a favor, just call the Google headquarters and send them the bill. And this here, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most extraordinary technologies coming out of MIT. Parmesh Shahani, who is a graduate of the master's program, knows the gentleman that created this. Is gesture-based computing. He's got a projector on his chest, color markers on his fingers, and he's actually making the computer work with gestures on his fingers. Just yesterday at the ITC Hotel in Perel, an English artist by the name of Imogen Heap wore these special electronic gloves, and she made music of the sound of an orchestra using this technology. And I'll show you how he can make a phone call dialing the palm of his hand. Do you think that's possible? Well, let me tell you that that is not only possible, that is happening right now. So those of you who go and get the palm read or want to know about your astrological future, maybe in future you'll just be able to dial it up on your hand and your astrologer will be able to send it to you directly onto your fingertips. I thought I'd just end with this, which is a very interesting new development, particularly for product development. When I was downstairs in the innovation area here at Godrej, I saw some of your key designers who told me that in the next few weeks they were going to be getting these. These are 3D printers. What's a 3D printer? If you're a designer and you're designing a product, it used to take months to get a special die cast, special machine tooling to see how that might be able to make your product become real. Well, now what you can do is on the computer create a design with graphics, with computer-assisted animation and design technologies, and you can then press a button and your 3D printer will actually, in plastic or in some kind of resin, print out the actual object. And if you think this is limited to only small objects, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you I've actually ridden in that car. That car was on show at the TED conference in California last year. I couldn't believe it, but this is the first 3D printed car, the body of that car on a huge 3D printing machine. Now if I said to you, do you think this is real, or do you think this is science fiction coming from some movie in Bollywood? Some people might say, oh, that's ridiculous. You could never print a car. Well, this is how fast the speed of change is happening with technology and two-way communication. And finally, I thought just to finish, particularly since Lady Gaga was here just 2 weeks ago, where she was the toast of the town. She performed at a party for 200 people for one of the founders of the Formula One here in India. She got paid $1 million for performing for 50 minutes. Not bad. And this picture here, you see her in, she's dressed in, that's meat. The dress is made out of meat, the shoes are made out of meat, the hat is made out of meat. She wore that to a big award show in New York, and she walked up the red carpet in her red dress. It was very cold that particular night, and they warned her, please do not stand too closely in front of the heaters and the heating units, because we didn't want to smell barbecued meat. But she's very clever, because the reason I put in this slide to show you is that there's a whole new thinking behind creativity and key personalities at the forefront of technology, at the forefront of smart machines, and at the forefront of media. Because Lady Gaga has shown there's a new intersection point, the intersection of social media, fashion, and also entertainment. And if you hit those objects, which is really, when you look at some of the big stars here in Bollywood, Salman Khan, Amir Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, that Khan family, fantastic gene pool. Those three brothers are really excellent. Not right. No, but certainly Amir Khan, he's certainly no idiot. He knows how to create 3 idiots, but not one. But this is just an interesting example for you to show you some of the changes. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. I hope this has given you some insight and some people into the future.